Let's get salty!
Everyone, Zeddy here again today with a brand new video, and there has been one constant in Hearthstone since United Stormwind launched nearly 3 years ago, back in the summer of 2021, was the dominance, the absolute sheer power level that the quest lines that were introduced brought to Hearthstone. In particular, this card right here, the Demon Seed, which dominated the game so much that I have I think a video, one of my most viewed videos is about what is this meta? It even made Kibler quit. Imagine making Brian Kibler quit Hearthstone. It was just for a little bit, but regardless, the quest lines warped the game so much, and the Demon Seed was by far the most powerful. And even to this day, again, almost 3 years removed from that, it is breaking Hearthstone in ways we haven't seen before. And we're gonna do a deep dive into the history of this card, all the cards that either got nerfed because of it, or the nerfs to this card itself, how no other card outside of maybe Shadow Step has been that much of an influencer on balance changes to cards, and what exactly is going on today that is still enabling this card to do outrageous things. And if you enjoy the content on the channel, if you like I've earned your subscription, please hit that sub button down below. Give the video a like. It helps us out a lot as we're on the road to 83,000 subscribers. So if you're unaware of what the Demon Seed is, you're a relatively newer player, weren't around for Stormwind, you don't play Wild, it is a quest line. It is the Demon Seed quest line, which starts in your opening hand. It's basically a guaranteed finisher you always have to start the game, and you basically have to follow 3 quest lines, where originally this red quest line take 6 damage on your turns, and the reward was the same. You would deal 3 damage to the enemy hero, you would heal it back up for 3. You then have to complete the next step of the quest line, which was, I believe, to deal 7 damage on your turns, and you would get the same reward of dealing 3 damage. And then lastly, you had to deal 8 damage on your own turns. Your reward would be Blightborn Tamsin, which is a 5 mana 7/7 minion, which had Battle Cry. For the rest of the game, damage you take on your turn damages your opponent instead, meaning any self-damage card, any fatigue effect, which basically, as a warlock, you're life tapping, you can draw your whole deck, will not hurt you. You are immune from it, and you have effectively infinite scaling damage towards your opponent. And this reward, you could just select to add to your hand the turn you're gonna play it. You take that last bit of damage, you play it, very hard to disrupt, and the effect of this card is incounterable. There's nothing you can do about it. Once this is online, the warlock will murder you. And that's basically what happened in very many different ways that led to a myriad of cards getting nerfed. We won't go over the wild versions of this deck because, well, the questline got banned within a month or so of its launch. It did take quite a bit of time, but it was even more absurd in Wild. The first version that really took popularity on the ladder hand questline Warlock. You were completing your questline with cards like Unstable Shadow Blast, your Backfires, your Raised Deads, you would get some minions back. You would just try and draw through your deck, get some large cards. You had Goldshire Null, a card that eventually got nerfed, but not by this deck. It was actually not nerfed, it was for Evolve Shaman purposes, but it was a way to defend yourself, and all of your health changes would help you cheat out this card, Flesh Giant, which started off at 8 mana. One of the first victims of the Demon Seed. This card got nerfed not once, but twice. It went from 8 to 9 to 10 mana. And basically you would want to stick a big minion. You had Baron Scavenger you could stick on the board. You could get Anthron out for cheap if your hand was completely full. And then you would just continuously try and have large minions on the board. And if you were able to accomplish that, you could give them Wind Fury with your Battleground Battlemaster, another card the Demon Seed and other decks certainly helped get nerfed from 5 to to 6 mana. So this version of the deck already has 3 separate nerfs. You also have good defensive tools in here, like removal in Drained Soul. Again, I mentioned Unstable Shadow Blast, and then Touch of Nathrazim, which was 1 mana, deal 2 damage to a minion. If it dies, you would restore 4 health to your hero. It got nerfed to 3 damage. Again, large part due to this deck. However, the Demon Seed dodged nerfs for quite a while. It took them some time because early on, they were very stubborn about admitting that this questline was rather problematic. So this first version was quite good, but it was not the only version, to say the least. There were also other builds that emerged pretty quickly that were just straight up fatigue. Use that fatigue damage, murder your opponent, and get to that as fast as possible. And this version ran Stealer of Souls, a 4 mana demon. The first card you draw each turn costs health instead of mana. That first card did not exist. You just drew a card. Any card, you could play it's with for health instead of mana, and when your questline was complete, that's damage going face, and beneficially, before that, it's damage you could get your questline done for relatively cheap. And when you couple that up with a Dark Glare and even more mana, Dark Glare was nerfed not once, but twice. Originally, it refreshed 2 mana crystals, went to 2 mana, and only refreshed 1 mana crystal. That was still broken, so went to 3 mana, where, well, we'll talk about this card at the end of our timeline pretty soon. So this card was nerfed twice alongside of that. Stealer of Souls, not only was it banned in Wild for non-Demon Seed reasons, although it probably would have been at some point. The first card part is for Wild. This card actually got nerfed to 6 mana so that you could no longer tutor your discard of Hand of Gul'dan, because even at 6 mana, it was probably good enough, but because you really wanted to discard your Hand of Gul'dan with this card, Nightshade Matron, which looked at the highest cost card, they bumped it to 6. And all of this at the same time would be discounted by drawing cards with Runed Mithril Rod, where after you draw 4 cards, you reduce the cost of cards in your hand by 1, then it would lose a durability. Started off at 3 mana, went to 4, and then 5 mana. It's so many crazy cards that got nerfed. And all of this, the Demon Seed was remaining untouched, but there was still more to come as nerfs evolved. I believe the Stealer version got nerfed very quickly. Stealer of Souls went to 6. The whole questline didn't get nerfed. People then went on to just playing a straight up fatigue version. No Stealer of Souls, just back to destroying your deck with a Soul Rend, clearing the board, self-damaging with Backfire, cheating mana with Rune Mithril Rod, which I think went to 4 for this version, and then you had the Hand of Gul'dan to draw, mill, and fatigue your opponent to death, and that remained a pretty valid strategy until Handlock re-emerged. It became a bigger threat as the balance changes evolved, as things changed in the Stormwind meta, that this Handlock version, even at the time, this was a 6 mana Battlemaster, had been nerfed. It was still a very problematic best deck basically in the format. It's ultimately the build that finally led to the Demon Seed being nerfed for the first time. And I believe the Wild ban was introduced, where instead it was 6, 7, and 8 each turn. It was 8, 8, and 8. You had to deal 8 self-damage, and the Demon Seed remained relevant afterwards. It was not as top tier, was not as prevalent. It always emerged. A meta version that existed just was that Handlock version that got an extra boost from a card like Dread like Tamsin, which was just an insane hero card. And eventually, as the time moved on, did get scaled back in the standard meta, and it wasn't quite as dominant. And one of the main reasons the Demon Seed didn't become a big threat or problematic in standard for the remainder of its run is they did not, throughout over a year and a half, print 1 card that could help support the archetype. Not 1 self-damage card was introduced, nothing. It was very clear, very evident that it was realized the Demon Seed is going to be a problem if we give it any help. And we are seeing that, we'll fast forward to Wild, that they just completely avoided it. And the second the Demon Seed rotated to Wild. We got the Festival of Legends set, which had fatigue packages, which could defend yourself against self-damage, could have scaling fatigue damage with cards like Crescendo. You've seen other self-damage effects emerge ever since then, that once the Demon Seed went, all of a sudden, it opened the doors, and yes, Wild has been suffering as a result. Fast forward to most recent times, just prior to the recent mini set being released, and over a year ago, the Demon Seed was eventually unbanned from Wild, where at the time, this was the suggestion I even had made. They made it go from 8, 8, and 8 on each questline step to 10 each, making it so that you literally had to deal full damage to yourself, all 30 damage, and just thinking there's no possible way you can survive and play this. Unfortunately, in WoW, they also at the same time reverted the change to Dark Pact, which is a 1-mana spell where you destroy a friendly minion. It restored only 4 health. They bumped it to 8, which made it that you had a lot more healing available. And in Wild, you had cards that were never in standard at the same time, like Crystallizer, which would deal 5 damage to your hero, gain 5 armor. This card alone is half of your questline proc with no real negative, right? You take the 5 damage, which procs your quest, but you gain the armor right back, and you bring it back with a card like Raised Dead, has made Demon Seed borderline really oppressive and strong in Wild, but Wild's a pretty crazy mode where everyone's killing each other super fast, that it would stay like a tier 2, tier 1 deck. And even this mode, basically you're playing Chamber of Viscidus, a card that would discard a card from your hand, draw more cards like Furnace Fuel, and kill your opponent in fatigue and cheat out big stats. Kind of similar to what we've always seen with this deck. And now we fast forward to current day, where we now have, again, the best deck in the format. Almost 3 years later, countless nerfs, as we mentioned, and there's some indirect nerfs through neutral cards like Moarg Artificer got hit as well, which is a card that was run in those decks, to the point where we have cards like Darkglare that's already been nerfed twice, Flesh Giant's already been nerfed twice, Touch of the Nether Scene, which was never reverted, and we have the introduction of a new card that just says, hello, I want to be played in the Demon Seed of 1 mana, draw 2 cards, deal 3 damage to your hero, shuffle 2 copies of this into your deck. So basically, infinite cheap card draw that infinitely self-damages, that works very well with the Darkglare, as it's effectively 0 mana before you complete your quest, since you're refreshing your mana the whole time. And it's just a complete mess again, where this quest line has just always been the center of the issue, the core issue of this deck, of everything around it. In a game like Hearthstone, where there's not much interaction, there's not much you can do, when for the rest of the game card is played, Tamsman creates an inevitability that just isn't something that should really exist in Hearthstone, of a win condition that you can't really interact with, considering it's a questline that starts in your hand. It's a card you can dump on the board whenever you want, and not even give the opportunity for a Theotar, for a Dirty Rat, for a Mutinous. You can play it, and then your opponent has no option to either play extremely aggressive and kill you before you can do it, or somehow OTK you in one spectacular combo, which has warped again the meta, which we saw tons of times during United Stormwind. We see it in a Wild, where now that is all Wild is yet again, very recently after the Mage questline got nerfed for very similar reasons. I'm hoping something will happen to help Wild out. I do think that the Demon Seed is the problem. At the end of the day, I still believe that Blightborn Tamsin is one of the worst designed cards, if not the worst designed card in Hearthstone history, and requires a rework. I don't know if it'll happen now. I don't know if it'll happen in years from now, but I am convinced that this card will be changed at some point. One argument has always been made to make the endgame effect deal damage to both sides, so that you self-damage still, your opponent takes the damage, but it's a way that you would have to set up, I guess, self-immune turns. But if you're immune, they shouldn't be taking the damage either, right? So I feel like it's a card that is fundamentally flawed. History has been on that side, with so many cards dying for its sins, and continue to die will lead to another card in Wild being banned or nerfed, whether it being the brand new mass production card. Time will tell, but I do believe that the Demon Seed needs to change at some point, and inevitably I think it will, unless they want to keep going down this road over and over. Or I guess at the end of the day, you can make the questline like take 100 damage on each turn. That would do it, but I don't know if that's really the route you want to go. Anyways, hopefully you guys enjoyed my little spiel about the Demon Seed, a card that I have not been able to stand since the day it's been launched, but I gotta admit, I still kind of enjoy playing it sometimes, because who doesn't like playing some solo player adventures once in a while? Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Have a great day and stay salty, my friends.